Here we're going to take a look at some paper samples or stock samples that we are going to use from a printer. Now, a printer can order lots of different types of stock and paper for us, and there's lots of different companies that actually we can choose from. But the idea is to know a little bit about the paper, or the interchangeable term stock, that will help us out understanding that. So you've created something, you've designed something, it looks great, we're really happy with it. Well, now what do? Now we're able to print it and choose the paper that we want to put it on. And realistically, the printer or the vendor who can help you understand all the different things that are available to you will have access to a lot of the types of paper, and will be able to let you know what they have in stock, what they can order, all the different types of paper that you might want to use. And there are certain stocks that are common that you would normally use. Certain things for business cards or letterhead or whatever. There's certain ones you would use normally, but there's also a lot of different things available to you. So it's good. The more you know about that, the better. You could offer your clients certain types of stock and paper that they might prefer, and some that actually, have better impression, they look better, they feel better, as opposed to just common stock that, anyone else can get, which is totally fine. So just to look at a few different things, and what we're looking at when we're talking about paper and stock is a few different things. We're talking about the weight of the paper, so the thickness of that paper. And we could judge the thickness of the paper just by flicking the corner of it. I know it's might be a silly thing, but that's how we usually can gain that understanding of paper, is just looking at something as simple as this. We have a Cougar book here, and it's a great book because it gives us a lot of different understandings of the different types of thicknesses we can get. So it starts at a text cover. So really, the thickness starts at a bond stock. A bond stock is very, very, very thin paper. Your normal printer paper you'd put in your own home printer. And then it goes into a text stock. Text stock can be a little bit thicker, and it can get into some different poundage. Here it goes into 50 pound up to 100 pound. And it's a really nice stock, but then we get thicker, and it's classified under cover stocks. And then we have some cover stocks here that we want to look at as well, some thicker cover stocks. That's usually like business card style, postcards, things like that. And then we can get into other different types of stocks, like index stock, Bristol, tag, board, newsprint, craft paper, synthetic, carbonless. There's a lot of different types of stocks, but these are the most common ones. So just to go through this, if I have a text cover, or a text weight, it's very, very thin, very, very thin, if you could tell from that. But then as I go down from a 70 or 50 to now a 70, which 70 text usually is maybe like a letterhead. It gets a little bit thicker. Then if I get down to now my cover area, my cover stock, I'm actually looking at that. Now it's even thicker. Now you can't really tell it necessarily, but now we're looking at stock that you might want to use for a business card. So a little bit thicker, even more so. Then it goes thicker and thicker. And then the last one here is 160 pound cover stock. And to see that, really, really thick. And that might be a little bit too much for a business card, or depending on what you're doing. If you're using a presentation portfolio, anything like that, you might want to use this as maybe a cover for a book, whatever it is. So there's a lot of different ones available to you here. So it goes from text to a cover stock, and then it gets even thicker from there. But mainly text and cover is what you're going to be dealing with quite a bit there. Now, we also have dealt with different types of paper. We could also look at now the different types of finishes we have on paper. So this was an uncoated stock, and that's our normal kind of stock that we see, once again, with our normal printer paper, uncoated. It just has a nice finish to it. There's not much to it. The ink absorbs into that paper quite nicely. But then you have something called coated stock, and a coated stock is more or less what we call a gloss stock. And really what it is, it's a finish, a clay finish on our area here. Very, very thin. It could be highly polished, or it could not be. It could be matte, it could be satin, it could be high gloss. There's a lot of different versions here, but it works the same. So the uncoated version, then we have our coated version, and you can see some of the reflection here that, yes, it is coated. And this is a matte finish here. You can see matte, and it's very nice, but once again, it's thin. It's a 60 pound text, so it's rather thin. But as I go through the book here, I'm gonna get more and thicker. The weight is going to get thicker. This is an 85 pound cover, and it gets thicker, and it's still a matte finish. So there are a lot of different glossy finishes that we can get to as well. So we've looked at weight, all the different types of weight, text, cover, and now we're also looking at opacity too. So the opacity is kind of when we're talking about how the light actually can go through that particular paper, if it could actually be seen on the other side. So if you flip that paper around, can actually, if I wrote something on that, can the ink be seen from the other side? So that measures from 0 to 100% opacity as well, which is kind of interesting to see if you need something with 0 opacity or 100% opacity in between, where you want to go with that. And then we also look at the brightness of the paper. We've seen certain papers that have a really strong brightness to them, that are very white, and then some that are, obviously we look here, we see our craft style. So craft or natural, sometimes we see it as. Natural has more of a, obviously, off-white. And then we have our really brights as well, which I'll go through in a little bit. So those are a few different things. We're looking at our weight, we're looking at opacity, we're looking at brightness, and then obviously we look at finishes as well. So there's a lot of different finishes. But here's one situation that we might come across too, is looking at different colors. So we have a lot of different colors here as well on this particular book. And this is Domtar. They use a lot of different colors as well. And here are all the different colors you can use. And these are very light. These are kind of like an opaque color. They're not super bright or too saturated. They're very nice. So you could put some ink on there and they would look really good. And there's a lot of different colors you could choose. So here you have a situation where maybe you want to add a little something to your flyer. Maybe you're putting out somewhere and you don't want to cover the whole thing, say, in orange. You want maybe this whole thing to be orange and you really like the orange color, but you don't want to have the whole thing covered in ink of orange, but you do want to have an orange effect to it. Well, maybe you just get paper that's orange, and the cost on this of this orange paper, depending on a full coverage of orange of ink, might be quite a bit different. So it might be nice to get that idea, say, no, I'm going to put on orange paper as opposed to putting an orange background on your design. But obviously that's just one version of it, and then it goes into even more different types of colors. But the last one I want to show you are the hot colors. So these are those really saturated colors that we can look at. They kind of look almost like post-it notes, but you can get this kind of paper, which obviously will add a different impression to your design, to your artwork, whatever the print might be. A lot of different colors available to you, different poundage as well, different weight, and a lot there that we can now be offered or use if we need to, for whatever application we're looking at. Now the other one here is like different types of finishes. So here we have it's coated, it's glossy, looks really nice. But now we have a few different things we could do. If you could look at here and kind of tell by the way the light refracts off this, this is embossed. And then there's another option there if you create a die, and then you could have something embossed and it pushes through, it pushes up on the paper, so it creates that nice feeling. It's really good. But obviously the opposite side would be debossed, so then that's a kind of a debossed effect, so you could have both embossed or debossed, which is really nice. And that's just one finish there. We could also look at foil stamping. So we have foil here, which you can see in the tie. It has a different type of reflection to it. And that's another die that you can create, and just a certain area would be covered in that specific style of using this one as an over metallic foil stamp, which is really nice. And then you could also have different types of gloss too. So you could have a really high gloss varnish. So this is a varnish that goes over top of a stock, maybe an uncoated. And so there's a few different options you can get with just different finishes, which is really nice as well. And I'm going to show you a few more finishes as we go through this. There is also different types of, well, going into this one here, this is also a foil stamp, but it's really nice, really well done, where we were able to actually use some of the gold. They have different types of foil, the gold here, and then obviously on the back we did the same thing. And setting this up was actually really easy, where everything else, I designed the card as is, and then what they asked me to do is prepare the artwork just with the areas that are going to be foiled with that, and then make those areas black. So I'm actually supplying two files, the actual finished artwork, and then I supply another file with just the areas that are going to be gold or whatever foil I choose. Separate that as a separate file and just black, just show that that's what more or less your template or your die is going to be. So that works out really cool, and now it's getting less and less expensive to get something like this, so it's really nice to be able to do that. There are other types of finishes that you can get on stock. There's laminations, and there's really quite a few different laminations you can get, not just your standard lamination anymore, which is really nice. So just to go through a few here, your normal, you have your gloss lamination, and this one actually I cut it to the edge. So there's another option here where normally you have, what I have here is you would have a lamination with a lip on it. See that extra lip? Now the lip is nice, but it kind of, over time, it can warp and wear, and it's not great. It'll never open, it really shouldn't open up. But over time, if something gets used enough, many, many years, it will eventually open up, potentially. Where this is nice, but just that look isn't as clean as if I had this particular one here, which is much cleaner. So, and this is actually cheaper to do when you actually cut off the lamination to the size of your piece, whatever it is, it's actually cheaper to do. So, and it's nicer. However, this can eventually open up and fray, which actually I think it's doing right now. Yeah, it's already opening up. You can see right there, it's opening. And that's not good, because the whole point of gloss is to protect, lamination is to protect the paper. Or if this is a piece that's going to be on a table, maybe there's going to be liquid there, you're going to have beverages, it's going to be on a tabletop at a restaurant. If water gets into that area, this thing is finished, it's ruined, because now that the paper is going to soak up that water. So it can protect for a while, and there's different types of lamination here that I'm going to show. You have a gloss laminate, which is obviously very high reflective. And then you have a matte laminate, which is nicer, not as reflective. And then you have a soft touch. Now you can't feel it obviously, but if you ever looked at soft touch, it has a really nice smoothness to it, and it obviously it doesn't have very little reflection at all. But then obviously the versions with the lips, so you could kind of tell what you kind of would prefer to have, a lip or without. So there's pros and cons to both, but at least you have that access to laminations that can really be beneficial to you. Another option here are, once again, different types of finishes that I got on these wedding invitations I designed, and they're really nice. But this is now a finish where we're looking at. This one is a linen, so I don't know if you can tell the texture there. The texture is a very nice texture. You can kind of see it in the flower there a little bit. It has that linen effect. It's kind of like the cross hatching, if you will, on the whole stock, and it's just like a very nice look and nice feel to it as well. Here we have a woven stock, which has a nice texture to it too, which you can kind of tell in that flower again. And once again, it's just the way it's pressed, the way it's put together, it just has a nice feel to it. And this happens to be a little bit thicker as well. So you can look at woven stock as well. And this one, I don't necessarily exactly know how this one was done, but once again, there's another nice texture on here, which you might be able to tell by looking at the light and how it reflects off of it. It's really, really well done. And it's nice feeling. Look, again, this is a wedding invitation. Maybe you're not going to use this for a letterhead or anything like that, but it does definitely have a nice tactile finish to it. Now all these ones have their own special finishes to them, and this one is a metallic looking one, so you actually have a nice kind of interesting reflected finish that goes off of that as well, which may or may not work for you. And then this one is a white pearl, so very similar to, but now it has even more reflection in the way that works. The next one being this one's called a crystal. So there's a lot of different paper that you can use, this one being opal. So if we look at all those together, kind of get a sense of, obviously there's a brightness situation that we're seeing. The opacity in general, I think, is all the same. You can't really see through any of those. So really, really nice, and obviously a lot of different options for you there as well to use. Now to continue going here, I just want to kind of show a few different ways you can use this. So we've got a few different pieces here, and these are both mailers that were given to us. So one is this high gloss, pretty thick, really nice, and another one, same thickness it seems, but just a little less gloss, and they're very nice and simple mailers that you get in the mail, but you could definitely see a presentation, an impression that you might get from one over the other. This is a very high gloss, this one a little less, but you're going to see these things in the mail, or you see them wherever you go, and you're going to get a sense of where they what speaks to you the most. And then you're going to say, you know what, I really like this stock, can I get that for me? So you could present this to your printer, say, listen, I want this stock and I want my design to be on that. And then all of a sudden you can actually start collecting different types of stock and paper, so you could actually refer back to your vendor, your print vendor, say, hey, listen, talk to your sales rep and say, I'd love to get this kind of stock. Now, this is a simple postcard or a rack card that we've seen, but it has a nice die cut on it, very interesting die cut. And you could set up a die cut in your design files and they would have you just follow it along. Plus, it also has a perforation there, so you can perforate on paper as well. Some paper perforates better than others, but you could also talk to your printer and see what works best. So some really nice die cut. It was a nice gloss stock. It has a nice presentation to it. But the other thing we can learn too is that this side can be coated. This side does not have to be coated. So a single piece of paper could actually have a coating on one side and nothing coated on the other side. And that's interesting because it's actually called, coated one side or coated two sides. So you could have a gloss area on this side and uncoated area on this side. And now that does come in handy when you want the front to be more of a presentation piece, something there, but on the back, in my situation, what I had to do, I actually had to have something to be able to write on the back. And it's much easier to write on an uncoated stock than it is to write on a coated stock. So that actually came in handy when I could do an uncoated on the back, C1S, coated one side, and I was able to do that. So that was really handy, and it's a nice other option for you with using coated and uncoated stocks. The other one here, this is actually not a paper, it's a polymer paper. It's almost made of plastic. It has a certain thickness to it. There are certain versions of it, of thicknesses, but it can't really rip. I've kind of done it a few times here. This kind of paper doesn't rip. And you could try really, really hard and it will, but there is an issue with the ink coverage where over time there can be a wear, and if you scratch at it enough, it'll start to come off a little bit, but this has been dragged through the mud quite a few times. So really, it does come in handy. It's very useful for a nice reusable menu, especially in this situation where you can wipe it off, clean it off anytime. If there's been some food or drink spilled on it, wipe it down and reuse it again. So polymer paper is really nice. Like I said, it's a paper, but it's plastic. But obviously the ink goes on it very well, but there are its issues of obviously the wear of that ink over time. So that's another option for you as well. Now, also to look at vinyl, there are many different ways to print on vinyl, many different types of vinyl available to you. So this one has a particular texture on it, as you can see, in the back. So some of these vinyls would just be, you could peel off the back and then you would stick it to something. Obviously, very nice ink coverage on here as well. But you do have to remember something about dot gain. So on an uncoated piece of paper, when the ink hits it, what happens to that little piece of ink, that little dot of ink, it actually spreads, it soaks into the uncoated stock. And that's okay, but you get a little more of a blurry or undefined edge where that could happen. Where you're using coated stock, a glossy stock, when the ink hits it, it doesn't soak into the paper as much. So it actually ends up having a much crisper edge to all the edges that you might find. So that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at paper and what kind of effect we're looking for. So that's vinyl, many different types of vinyl to look at. And then looking at over here, another mailer piece that I received. And it's just nice to kind of look and see what's available to you and different things you do, get different ideas. Lots of scoring, lots of folding on this, but also a really interesting die cut method here, which is really cool and kind of fun to play around with. So it's always nice to kind of get a sense of the different things that are available to you. But once again, next time you look at paper, look at the weight of it, look how thick it is, look at the brightness of it. Is it very bright, the whiteness, or is it not? And can you see through the back of it? Obviously, that would be your opacity. A lot of different things there. And here's another interesting presentation piece we had. If you look at that, you see these kind of stripes here. That's part of like this varnish that was put on it, and it creates this nice little pattern that you could put on. Even the stock is gloss. The stock is already still gloss, but they put a varnish over top of it to create some interest, to create some intrigue for the cover of it. And then they used a coil bound binding here, but and they used tabs. So these tabs are actually die cut. They're die cut tabs where you come in and you cut that out, you cut around it, and obviously each one's a little bit different, and they cut that tab out. So all these pieces of paper were cut out in a certain way. And the stock itself, obviously you have your thinner stock on the inside, but the tabs that were obviously much thicker. So this is a really well put together presentation piece. But once again, each individual new chapter or new tab has this nice blind varnish where it's not actually going over top of another design. It's actually just a design itself, the varnish, which is really, really nice. So that's another nice presentation piece you could look at. And there's this really great company online that I always recommend we look at. It's called Moo, and they're really impressive, the different types of paper they can give you. Now, this is a sample, free sample that they can give you if you go online, moo.com, and they will provide this for us, mail it to you, and give you lots of different samples of different cards. Or actually, this one's the different cards, the different thicknesses, the different finishes, so you can learn a lot more about stock and getting free samples here. Or you could reach out to a paper supplier in general and ask for some stocks. It's always good to have some stock books on hand. And then here's another one that they gave me 2 free ones. Once again, you just request them and they can send it to you. And you get some stickers and different things like that, different finishes, different thicknesses, different types of stock. Give you a lot of different ideas here. And obviously the presentation piece is really, really well done. So that's very nice. And a nice little texture on here as well. So they use a die cut. So they use a lot of different methods for the paper there. A few more I want to show you here. Here's a nice presentation from PBI. Really well done. It's got that soft touch lamination on it, so it has a really nice feel. But over time, obviously, I've handled this quite a bit. It can leave marks, but really a lamination, certain laminations, if you put your finger on it, it won't leave a fingerprint. There are certain types of laminations that will. If you put a varnish over top of something, usually the varnish also makes it so the fingerprints or thumbprints don't get left behind either. If you look at some laminations or some stock, some gloss stock, if you touch it, there's going to be fingerprints all over it. So if you want to talk to your vendor, say, I want something, but don't want to have my fingerprints left on it after it's used, you talk to them and they'll help you with certain stock. So as we can see, it has this little die cut here as well, which is really nice. And here's another great little piece. It has this great finish. So once again, no graphic underneath it, but the varnish is the graphic. That's what kind of it comes out. So it looks really, really nice. It's a very professional looking piece. They have all these other pieces inside. So they use a linen here, a nice thick linen to show that off, and a book with the same linen effect, but obviously a nice thinner linen they've used for the inside pages. And then they have this other nice kind of like letterhead piece, but a little bit thicker, but it is gloss, and it's gloss both sides. And then they have these nice little business card size things here as well. But once again, a nice die cut area here, die cut for the business cards, and a really nice piece that is put all together for us. So really, really nice to look at there. Now, the last thing I want to show you is this piece here. This was another one from PBI. They have this new machine, a Scodix machine, that can do pretty amazing things. And this is actually one of my favorites, where it could actually create, it's not a level of a varnish. It actually has a thickness to it. It actually has like almost like a 3D effect to it, like it's popping off the page. So you could get levels of how high it comes up, but it does a really great job. And look at this, it has like this stamp, this foil, a metallic stamp look to it, which it can provide as well. Once again, that has a thickness to it too. So this Scodix machine is a very nice machine to use. I don't know if you can tell here, see the difference in the eyes and how this side, there's nothing on it, but this side, you can see how that looks and how the fingernails pop. And this is just a varnish that goes over top. And the great thing about the varnish too, is it's variable data, where you could actually change the data on it. You can see that there. You can change the data as it goes through each print. So if you want to do a number change or a name change on each new print that comes up, you can do that. And that's pretty amazing with this. And each individual piece here can actually be touched. Each individual little dot, if you can tell, actually has that varnish on it. And so you can feel each individual little bump, which is really, really nice. So there's a lot of different options available to you as stock. So it's very good to know all the things that are available to you. So once again, we're looking at the weight of a stock, the thickness of it. This is from that technical note. You have your different weights, you have your opacity, you have your brightness, and all the different types of finishes that we can look at that would really, that are the most important things to know about the stock and how we can actually prepare our work for these different types of pieces. Because sometimes you have to think, okay, if it's going to go on this type of paper, I need to prepare my artwork this way. Or you know what, if it's going to go on this type of stock, maybe I need to make my type a little bit bolder, especially if it's going to be white on a black. or a situation like that. So it's always good to have your end result in mind of what the paper is going to be, which paper is going to be used, and then actually prepare your artwork accordingly.